So the new Uzumaki anime is finally out, after what felt like an eternity since the first teaser dropped, promising a faithful adaptation of the Junji Ito's legendary manga. And sadly, I didn't like it very much. In fact, I was left quite frustrated as someone who was anxiously awaiting its release after seeing all the promises and the names attached to it. Okay, what distinguishes this adaptation from the past ones is an earnest attempt at doing his works justice. It's not a cash grab, it has seemingly a good budget and most importantly, time, with it being in production for over 3 years. For better or for worse. At the time of this recording, 2 of the 4 episodes are out and the animation quality has dropped significantly. This comes after news of studio change and other issues that happened during the production, which is honestly such a bummer considering the time that was given to this anime. But I don't want that to be the primary focus of this video, as my issues with the adaptation have more to do with the actual vision of the series and how it has unfolded thus far. The decision of it being black and white certainly stands out, being a rarity in anime and with promising names such as Hiroshi Nakahama, the director of Mushishi, and Colin Stetson, the composer behind Hereditary. All these decisions earned this adaptation a goodwill, but after watching the anime in retrospect, it appears as if it is genuinely terrified by the sheer prospect of being another bad or disappointing work, like all the previous adaptations of Junji Ito. The approach for a black and white aesthetic in hindsight just seems another means to be as close to the manga as possible, as it tries its best at doing justice to those iconic panels. But that is about it. There's no clear vision for the anime outside the very idea of it being an adaptation. It's scared to have anything original to say due to its respect to the source material. But my question then is, why does it exist? Is it just to fulfill a childish idea of doing justice to Junji Ito? And what does that even mean? Because it is doing just an inferior version of an already well-regarded work. Looking back though, amongst all the anticipation, the one decision that was the most controversial was the episode length of it being only 4 episodes. And those worries came true as the anime tries to combine all the stories seamlessly into one narrative as opposed to the episodic nature of the manga. And that is probably the best part of the anime, but the execution is terrible, as it is trapped between an idea that can only work in a feature film, but it finds itself in the clutches of being a series. But let's say you take that aspect out of it. It still doesn't work because it doesn't expand beyond its own approach, so what we are left with are adaptations of seemingly most of the chapters taking place all at the same time. And why that goes against it lies in how the original manga is structured, where each chapter has a setup that eventually leads to a scary climax, that is multiple short stories. But when you combine them, all those shocking endings to a chapter starts happening from the very first 5 minutes, and after a while they lose any impact, because it breaks the flow of how a narrative works and makes the whole experience feel incredibly disjointed, as we are constantly swapping between characters and stories and there is no clear narrative or theme tying them. So that initial minor controversy ended up being one of the biggest issues with the series, because the only way to faithfully adapt the manga is to have an episodic structure that progresses the larger narrative in the background. Of course, the alternative to that is focusing on either one specific chapter being the primary focus, through which we can see all the events that happen in the background. That adds to the horror of the show or something new and original entirely. Look at episode 2 for example. This scene with the couple at the end doesn't work in conveying the horror, as up to this point there have been several of such scenes and it's not saying anything beyond that and ultimately ends up feeling quite random. But imagine the same scene was happening in the background through another character's perspective, who we were following leading up to this point. It now works in adding to the dread that character would feel, and something we can buy, while still having the sense of mystery surrounding the happenings of the town. But of course, probably the most important component has to be how well it succeeds as a horror work. And that's the worst part of the show. Let's take a look at the idea of why people think Junji Ito's work are impossible to adapt, and that simply comes down to how well he uses manga as a medium to tell his stories. His horror works due to the stillness of a panel, when one is forced to stare at a static image as it stares back at you, and the dread slowly settles in. This would completely lose its effect in motion, as the way time works in the two mediums affects the way we perceive horror. Try to look at a manga volume like a timeline that we have access to and can flip to any part, and the panels represent different holes through which you can peek through at certain events and tie them subconsciously. But in animation it is more subjective, as you are with the director viewing the events, and time is passing by the very concept of being in motion. There are no gaps where your imagination can impact your enjoyment. Instead, cuts and transitions are used to tie together events, and it's that rhythm that creates an immersive experience. The problem with Uzumaki lies in its attempt at trying to do both and succeeding in neither. Its horror relies on those panels, but in motion they lose their effect. So, as much as the creator went to great efforts at replicating those panels, this feels eerie, while this feels strange at best and comical at worst. Any additional story beat or even just a scene where a character is horrified by the happenings around them would have been great, but nothing of that sort exists because it's not in the original manga, which makes the direction appear bland and uninteresting, as it's just showing us the events that are happening, but it doesn't have anything to say about what's happening, which makes it hard for anyone to really care about anything presented to them. In Uzumaki, there is no sense of weight to any of the characters or scenes because the essence of the series is lost in the spiral of wanting to be like the original manga while desperately trying to find its identity. Which is sad, as I was really rooting for this anime to succeed. But it is important to understand the point of an adaptation. Junji Ito is so legendary due to the works in his preferred medium, and there is no reality where replicating that would ever work nearly as well in any other medium, especially for an author like Ito. But that is not me saying an adaptation is impossible. Adaptation just means an artist giving their own unique spin of a story in a different medium with its own set of rules. Thus, you can't replicate the horror of Junji Ito, but you can make something interesting out of the narrative present in Uzumaki or any individual work of his. What led me to this video is the idea of animation being not a suitable medium for horror, which is completely ridiculous to me, though more on that later. Look forward to more videos related to this topic during this Halloween month. And thanks for watching, and subscribe if you liked the video. Until next time.